The bottle of Macallan. 18-year single malt caught the dim glow of the emergency lighting, amber liquid sloshing gently as I turned it in my hands. 2:47 in the morning. I don't drink scotch. Never have. The most expensive bottle I've ever owned was a $12 bourbon I bought for my brother's birthday in 2019. This bottle cost more than my truck payment. I read the label again, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. 20 years I'd spent building this bunker. 7,000 square feet of reinforced concrete buried beneath Montana soil. 14 months of food supplies. Water filtration rated for a decade. Backup generators, medical supplies, communications equipment. Everything a man could need to keep his family alive when the world decided to stop making sense. And someone else's whiskey on my shelf. The bunker has a 12-digit code. Only 2 people in the world know it. I'm one of them. I'd gotten back from the Preparedness Expo in Bozeman around 6 that evening. 3 days of seminars, vendor booths, and conversations with people who understood that hoping for the best while preparing for the worst wasn't paranoia. It was common sense. The drive home through the Montana twilight had been peaceful, the mountains turning purple against the fading sky. And I'd been thinking about the new solar panel systems I'd seen demonstrated. Cheryl had left a note on the kitchen counter. Working late. Dinner's in the fridge. S. 24 years of marriage distilled into 9 words and an initial. Functional. That's what we were. Not romantic, not passionate, functional. She was a dental hygienist at a practice in town, kept regular hours, maintained a clean house. I was a retired electrical engineer who'd spent 30 years working on Montana's power grid before cashing out my pension and buying 80 acres of land 47 miles outside Billings. We had 2 grown kids, Emma in Seattle, Daniel finishing up at the university in Missoula. We existed together. That's about as poetic as I can make it. The bunker inspection was routine. I did one every month, kept meticulous records in a notebook that lived in my workshop safe. Temperature, humidity, inventory counts, equipment checks. Most people would call it obsessive. I called it being thorough. The first thing I noticed was the dehumidifier. I keep it at 45%. Always. That's the optimal range for long-term food storage. The digital display showed 52%. Someone had changed it. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, staring at those numbers like they were written in a foreign language. Then I started looking. Really looking. Boot prints in the fine layer of dust near the secondary exit. Size 11, maybe 12. I wear size 9. And then the whiskey. It was hidden behind my water purification tablets on the supply shelf, pushed back like someone wanted it out of casual sight, but still accessible. I pulled it out, held it up to the light. Half empty. My first thought wasn't anger. It was confusion. Cheryl didn't drink scotch either. And she certainly wouldn't spend this kind of money without telling me. The digital lock on the bunker door logs every entry. I checked the records, my fingers steady on the keypad even as my mind raced through possibilities. October 5th, 6:14 p.m. October 6th, 7:22 p.m. Both times I was in Bozeman. Cheryl entered the bunker twice while I was away. Here's something people don't understand about preppers. We don't react. We assess. Reacting gets you killed when the power goes out and your neighbors start getting desperate. Assessing keeps you alive. I didn't confront her that night. Didn't say a word when she got home from her late shift at 11, smelling like wine and something else I couldn't quite place. I just kissed her cheek, asked about her day, and went to bed. And I started planning. Wednesday morning. I waited until Cheryl left for work before returning to the bunker with a flashlight and a notepad. Item by item, shelf by shelf, I cataloged everything. Cross-referenced it against my master inventory list. Looked for anything that didn't belong. I found the jacket stuffed behind a stack of emergency blankets in the sleeping quarters. Men's leather, size large. Worn soft with age. The kind of thing a guy keeps because it fits him just right. I checked the pockets with the clinical detachment of a man defusing a bomb. A gas station receipt. Dated September 22nd. Roundup, Montana, about 45 minutes from here. Paid with a card ending in 4471. I brought the jacket to my nose. Cologne. Something expensive, Mediterranean smelling. Aqua de something. I've never owned cologne in my life. Cheryl knows that. For a long moment, I just stood there in my bunker, holding evidence of my wife's affair like it was a particularly interesting artifact I'd found at a yard sale. The anger would come later, I knew. Right now, there was only the cold clarity of facts arranging themselves into a pattern I didn't want to see. Someone had been in my bunker. A man. Wearing size 11 boots and expensive cologne, drinking expensive whiskey. While I was away. With my wife. I put the jacket back exactly where I found it. Took photos first, including close-ups of the receipt. Then I went upstairs to observe. Thursday. I watched Cheryl like she was a stranger I'd been hired to investigate. She left for work at 7:45, same as always. Came home at 5:30, same as always. Made dinner, talked about a difficult patient who'd needed 3 fillings. Asked about my plans for the weekend. Normal. Completely normal. Except her phone had a lock code now. 4 digits she had to punch in every time she checked a message. She'd never locked her phone in 24 years of marriage. I knew because I'd never locked mine either. We'd had that conversation once, about trust and openness. She'd been the one who said couples shouldn't have secrets. At dinner, I tested the waters. Been thinking about upgrading the bunker's ventilation system, I said, casual as commenting on the weather. Might need to change the access code while the contractors are working. Her fork stopped moving for half a heartbeat. Most people wouldn't have noticed. I'd been married to this woman for nearly a quarter century. Oh? Her voice was steady, but I heard the slight tightness underneath. When? Still planning, maybe next month. She nodded, already steering the conversation toward her sister's upcoming birthday party. I let her, noted the deflection, added it to the pile. Friday morning, I drove to Roundup. The gas station from the receipt was a small place off the main highway, the kind with 2 pumps and a clerk who'd been working there long enough to remember the regulars. I pulled in, bought a coffee I didn't want, and struck up a conversation. Looking for a buddy of mine, I said, keeping my tone friendly. Drives a dark SUV, maybe looks like law enforcement. Said he stops through here sometimes. The clerk, a heavy-set woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain, nodded immediately. Oh, you mean Deputy Brewer? Yeah, he comes through here pretty regular. Lives out past the county line somewhere, but he's Yellowstone County Sheriff's Department. I kept my face pleasant while my stomach dropped about 6 inches. That's him. Tyler, right? That's the one. Nice guy. Always tips on coffee. She wiped down the counter, chatty now. His wife's a nurse over in Billings. Sweet lady, they've got 2 little ones. Yeah, he's mentioned them. You 2 work together or something? Something like that. I thanked her, finished my coffee outside, and sat in my truck for a long time, watching the empty highway stretch toward the mountains. The coffee went cold in my hand. I didn't notice. Tyler Brewer, 38 years old, deputy with the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Department. I knew him. Of course I knew him. He'd attended 3 of my community preparedness workshops last year, sat in the front row, asked smart questions about water purification and emergency communications. Told me once, over coffee after a session, "You preppers aren't crazy. You're the smart ones. I want to build my own setup someday." He'd borrowed my generator during a power outage last winter. I'd helped him load it into his county-issued SUV. He'd shaken my hand and said he owed me one. Now he owed me a lot more than that. I spent the weekend building a profile, property records, public information, the kind of details anyone could find if they knew where to look. Tyler was married to Rachel, a nurse at Billings General. 2 kids, 8 and 5, 11 years on the force, up for promotion to sergeant. A family man, just like me. County vehicles in Montana are GPS tracked. Standard policy for accountability. Patrol deputies log their locations during shifts, and those logs are technically public record under the state's open information laws. I sat in my workshop Saturday night, surrounded by tools and equipment I'd accumulated over decades, and I thought about what I knew. Cheryl had given Tyler the code to my bunker, the 12 digits I'd chosen based on my children's birthdays. She'd brought another man into the sanctuary I'd built to protect my family, and she'd done it deliberately, repeatedly, while I was hundreds of miles away thinking about solar panels and water filtration. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was an operation, and I'd been the mark. Sunday morning, I drove to a prepper supply warehouse in Billings I'd used before. Paid cash for 4 wireless HD cameras, a motion-activated audio recorder, and a secure digital storage unit. Total cost, $2,847. I had the receipt for expensive cologne and the receipt for surveillance equipment. The second one felt a lot more honest. Monday, I installed the cameras while Cheryl was at work. The main living area got one hidden in a smoke detector I'd bought specifically for the purpose. The sleeping quarters got another, tucked into an air vent with a clear line of sight to the bed. The entrance corridor and the secondary exit each got their own units. I'd designed this bunker to keep my family safe from external threats. Now I was using that same infrastructure to document the threat that had been sleeping next to me for 24 years. The feeds routed to an encrypted server I set up in my workshop. Password protected, redundant backup drives, everything a man needed to ensure his evidence would survive whatever came next. I tested the system Tuesday night while Cheryl thought I was at a preparedness meeting in Helena. Sat in a motel room 2 hours away, watching my empty bunker on a laptop screen, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. She stayed home, watched television, went to bed alone. But when I came back Wednesday, I floated the bait. There's a survival expo in Great Falls next weekend, I told her over dinner. 3 days. Water purification focus. Been meaning to upgrade our systems. She didn't look up from her chicken. Again? You just went to one. Different focus. It's important. Okay. Still not looking at me. I'll be fine here. She didn't ask any follow-up questions. Didn't suggest coming along, didn't complain about being alone another weekend. She agreed too easily, and we both knew why, even if only one of us knew the other knew. That night, I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling in the dark. She fell asleep quickly. She always did, clear conscience or not. But I stayed awake for hours, thinking about the man I used to be and the man I was becoming. 24 years ago, I'd been young and hopeful and stupid enough to believe that marriage meant something permanent. That, till death do us part, was a promise, not a placeholder. That the woman sleeping next to me would be there when I was old and gray and the world had finally decided to stop making sense. Now I knew better. Some disasters you can prepare for, some you can't. But you can always control how you respond when they arrive. I smiled and finished my dinner. The emails were worse than the footage. I'd known our home network inside and out. I was the one who designed it, maintained it, secured it against outside intrusion. I'd never thought I'd need to secure it against my own wife. The hidden account was simple to find once I looked. Cheryl.Whitfield, backupeggmail.com. 18 months of correspondence with Tyler Brewer. I downloaded the entire archive to a flash drive and read it that night in my workshop, the door locked, the lights low. Can't wait to see you Friday. Sees in Bozeman until Monday. The bunker is perfect. No one around for miles. We could scream and nobody would hear. He suspects nothing. Poor thing thinks I'm as boring as he is. When C's gone next month, I want to spend the whole weekend down there. Tell R you're working overtime. 18 months. A year and a half of lies, of coordinated schedules, of my absences carefully tracked and exploited. She'd been sharing my travel calendar with her lover like they were planning a military campaign. And maybe they were. One email from 3 months back stopped me cold. I think we should tell him, Cheryl had written. End this. I can't keep lying. Tyler's response came 6 hours later. Don't be stupid. He'll take everything. We wait until I make sergeant. Then we figure out the next step. She'd thought about confessing. He'd talked her out of it, not for her benefit, but for his career advancement. He was using her as much as she was betraying me. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the wind move through the Montana pines outside my workshop window. Then I started making phone calls. Frank Holloway was 62 years old and had spent 25 years with the FBI before retiring to Montana and becoming the most paranoid man I'd ever met, which, in prepper circles, was saying something. We'd met at a conference in 2019 and had been trading favors ever since. He lived alone on 40 acres about an hour north of me, surrounded by enough security equipment to make a small government jealous. I drove out to see him on a Thursday afternoon, brought a 6-pack of the dark lager he liked. We sat on his porch overlooking the valley while I laid out what I'd found. Frank listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. When I finished, he took a long pull from his beer and stared out at the mountains. GPS misuse plus falsified duty logs, he said finally. That's not just a fireable offense, Carl. That's potential criminal misconduct, official malfeasance. If the county prosecutor wanted to push it, Brewer could be looking at jail time. I'm not trying to put him in jail. I just want him gone. Sometimes that's worse. Frank smiled, thin and knowing. A man can survive jail. Losing his identity, his pension, his standing in the community he served for 11 years. That's a death of a different kind. You sound like you feel sorry for him. I don't. I'm just saying you should understand exactly what you're about to do. He finished his beer, crushed the can. How are you planning to play it? Clean, I said. No vigilante nonsense. Everything by the book. Documentation first, legal action second, maximum impact with minimum exposure. Smart. Document everything. Get the GPS records through FOIA. You've got standing as a citizen to request patrol data for your area. Cross-reference with his official logs. Already submitted the request. Frank laughed, a dry sound. Of course you did. What about the divorce side? Meeting with Denise Carver tomorrow. Good choice. She's sharp. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with those FBI eyes that never really turned off. Carl, can I ask you something personal? Go ahead. How are you holding up? Really? I thought about it. Really thought about it, which was more than I'd allowed myself to do since finding that bottle of whiskey. I don't know, I admitted. There should be more feelings, I think. Anger, grief, something. Instead, there's just this. Planning. Assessing. Like she's a problem to be solved instead of a person I spent half my life with. That's the training, Frank said quietly. We teach ourselves to compartmentalize, to stay functional under pressure. It's useful when the world's falling apart. It's less useful when the falling apart is personal. So what do I do about it? Nothing, right now. Handle the immediate threat first. The feelings will come later when it's safe. Just make sure you've got someone to talk to when they do. I didn't have anyone, I realized. Not really. Cheryl had been my person for 24 years. The kids had their own lives. The Prepper Network was good for tactical advice, but emotional support wasn't really our specialty. I'll figure it out, I said. Frank nodded like he believed me. I wasn't sure I did. Denise was a paralegal who specialized in family law, another contact from the prepper network. She'd helped half a dozen guys in our circle navigate divorces over the years, always with a focus on asset protection and documentation. "You still have that prenup?" she asked when I met her at a coffee shop in Billings, a manila folder of documents between us. Prenup? I'd forgotten about it entirely. 1999 felt like ancient history. Denise pulled out a photocopy. "You signed this before your wedding. Standard stuff, mostly. Separate property stays separate, which is already Montana law. But there's a clause here you might have forgotten about." I read where she pointed. "Fidelity provision. If either party commits adultery, they forfeit their claim to any joint assets." "She signed this," I said slowly. 25 years ago. Without really reading it, probably. Most people don't. Denise's smile was thin and professional. She was young, in love, didn't think it would ever matter. And now? Now it means she doesn't just lose the bunker and the land. Those were always yours, purchased with your inheritance before the marriage. She loses her share of your joint savings too. All of it. I sat back in my chair, coffee going cold in front of me. The bunker, the 80 acres, the equipment. I'd known I could protect all of that. But the $34,000 in our savings account, the money we'd built together over 2 decades of functional marriage, I'd assumed we'd split that down the middle. Cheryl had signed away her right to any of it. All I had to do was prove she'd cheated. "I need an attorney," I said. "Someone who won't flinch." Denise wrote a name on a napkin and slid it across the table. "Harrison Webb. Tell him I sent you." "And Carl?" She met my eyes directly. "I've seen a lot of men go through this. The ones who try to win by being angry always lose something. The ones who stay calm, who document everything, who let the system work, they come out the other side." "I'm not angry," I said, and it was true. The anger was there, underneath, but it was banked like coals waiting for fuel. Right now, I just felt cold, clear, focused. Like I was preparing for a disaster I'd finally seen coming. The GPS records arrived on October 23rd, 2 weeks after I'd filed the FOIA request. 14 months of patrol data for Deputy Tyler Brewer's county-issued SUV, delivered in a stack of spreadsheets dense with timestamps and coordinates. I spent 3 days analyzing the data, cross-referencing locations with my own travel records. The pattern emerged like a photograph developing in a darkroom. 23 instances where Tyler's vehicle was logged at or near my property during my documented absences. 19 of those occasions, his official duty log showed him patrolling other areas. The South County route, Rural Road 7, the industrial district on the other side of Billings. He'd been parking at my land, entering my bunker, sleeping with my wife, and lying to his employer about where he was. For over a year. I created a spreadsheet, color-coded the discrepancies, printed everything in triplicate. Then I called Jim Kowalski. Jim was 49, an IT specialist who handled digital security for half the prepper groups in Montana. He arrived at my workshop that Friday with a laptop bag and the expression of a man who'd heard just about everything. "Walk me through the chain of custody," he said, settling into a chair across from my workbench. I showed him everything. The camera footage, time-stamped and dated, metadata intact. The audio recordings with clear admissions of duty fraud. The GPS records with their damning coordinates. The email archive with its 18 months of correspondence. Jim worked in silence for nearly an hour, running verification software, checking file integrity, documenting his own analysis. When he finally looked up, his face was neutral, but his eyes held something like respect. "This is clean," he said. "Forensically sound. No tampering, no manipulation. If this goes to court, no one's going to be able to claim you doctored anything." That was the point. "I know." He packed up his equipment, then paused at the door. "Carl? For what it's worth, I'm sorry. No man should have to go through this." "Plenty of men do," I said. "The difference is preparation." Sunday, October 20th. I told Cheryl I was leaving for Great Falls in the morning, the fake expo I'd mentioned weeks earlier. I packed a bag, hugged her goodbye, said, "I love you," and felt nothing when the words left my mouth. She said, "Be safe," and smiled, and I wondered if she could even tell the difference between lying and breathing anymore. I drove 30 miles down the highway, pulled off at a rest stop, and opened my laptop. The motion sensor triggered at 2:34 p.m. Cheryl entered the bunker first, her movements casual and familiar. She'd done this dozens of times before. 2 minutes later, Tyler Brewer followed. They developed some operational security, apparently, not arriving together. Amateur stuff, but it had worked on me for 18 months. Tyler was in civilian clothes, but had arrived in his patrol vehicle. The exterior camera on my workshop caught the county seal clearly, the vehicle number visible on the door. They stayed in the bunker for 4 hours. I watched some of it. Not the intimate parts. I didn't need those images burned into my brain, and I had timestamps for the lawyers if it came to that. But I watched them drinking my bourbon, eating my emergency rations, sitting on furniture I'd built with my own hands. "All this for what?" Tyler said at one point, gesturing around the bunker with a dismissive wave. "The world's not ending, babe," Cheryl laughed. 20 years of his life, and we're the only ones who actually use it. I paused the video. Rewound. Watched her laugh again. 24 years. 2 kids. A life built together, however imperfect. And she was sitting in my sanctuary, mocking everything I'd worked for, with a man who'd smiled at me and borrowed my generator and called me one of the smart ones. The anger finally came then, rising up like floodwater behind a dam. I let myself feel it for exactly 30 seconds, timing it on my watch. Then I boxed it up, set it aside, and kept watching. Around 7 p.m., Tyler put on a uniform shirt he'd apparently stashed in the bunker, getting ready for a late shift, I assumed. "I logged myself at the South County Patrol," he said, checking himself in the small mirror by the bunker's sink. "No one ever checks." Cheryl was stretched out on the bed behind him. "What if someone calls in something from that area?" I say I was already responding to another call and couldn't reach them. Works every time. He turned to look at her, his reflection confident and lazy. "If anyone asks, I was checking on a report of trespassers on rural Route 7. Very thorough investigation. Took hours. Falsification of official records. Misuse of county resources. Career-ending admissions delivered on crystal-clear audio while my wife watched from my bed. I saved the files. Backed them up to the encrypted cloud storage Jim had set up. Made another physical copy on a hard drive I'd stored at Frank's property. Then I closed the laptop and drove home. Cheryl greeted me Monday evening like nothing had happened. Her smile was warm, her questions about the expo appropriately interested, her dinner appropriately delicious. I noticed the bunker's dehumidifier had been reset to 45%. She'd covered her tracks, or thought she had. "Quiet weekend?" I asked, passing her the salad bowl. "Very. Watched some movies. Cleaned a little." She met my eyes without a flicker. "You know how it is." "I do," I said. "I really do." That night, I reviewed more of the email archive, searching for anything I might have missed. And I found it. A thread from 2 months before my discovery where Cheryl had asked Tyler directly, "What if he finds out?" His response made my jaw tighten. "He's a prepper. They're paranoid about the government, not their wives. He'll never suspect. Besides, if it gets bad, I can make his life difficult. Badge has perks." Tyler hadn't just been sleeping with my wife. He'd been confident he could use his position as a law enforcement officer to intimidate me if I ever caught on. The badge wasn't just his identity, it was his insurance policy. They both thought I was a paranoid fool who'd spend his life preparing for disasters that would never come. Too distracted by imaginary threats to notice the real one in his own home. They'd underestimated me badly. November 1st. I met with Harrison Webb, the divorce attorney Denise had recommended. His office was on the third floor of a professional building in downtown Billings, all leather chairs and diplomas, and the quiet confidence of a man who'd seen every variety of marital destruction. I laid out my documentation. The videos, the audio, the GPS records, the emails, the prenup with its fidelity clause. Webb reviewed everything in silence for nearly 20 minutes. When he looked up, his expression was carefully neutral, but I'd spent enough time reading people to see the assessment behind his eyes. "This is comprehensive," he said. "You've done more legwork than most private investigators." "I'm thorough." "I can see that." He tapped the prenup with one finger. "This fidelity clause is enforceable. The evidence of adultery is overwhelming. In terms of asset division, your wife is going to receive her personal belongings, her own retirement accounts, and essentially nothing else." "And the bunker? The land?" "Separate property acquired before the marriage. Always was yours, always will be." I nodded. I'd known that, but hearing it from a professional made it feel more real. "What about him?" I asked. "The deputy." Webb's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's not really a civil matter." "I'm not asking about civil matters. I'm asking what happens when I take this evidence to his department's internal affairs division." "Ah." Webb leaned back in his chair. "GPS misuse, falsified duty logs, misconduct with a civilian in an official vehicle. If this evidence is authenticated, and it appears to be, Deputy Brewer's career is finished. He'll be terminated with cause, forfeit his pension, potentially face criminal charges for official misconduct." "Good." Webb studied me for a moment. "Mr. Whitfield, I've represented a lot of men in your position. Most of them want to burn everything down. They want dramatic confrontations, public humiliations, revenge that feels satisfying in the moment and costs them everything in the long run. I'm not most men." "No," he agreed. "You're not. What you've built here, this documentation, this approach, it's going to work. But I need you to understand something. Once we file, there's no going back. Your marriage will be over. Your wife's life will be destroyed. This deputy's life will be destroyed. You'll have to live with that." I thought about Cheryl laughing in my bunker. Thought about Tyler's smug confidence that his badge would protect him. Thought about 18 months of lies while I slept next to a stranger and called it marriage. "I can live with it," I said. "File the papers." November 4th. D-Day. I'd chosen the date deliberately. Simultaneous strikes, coordinated timing, no chance for either of them to warn the other or mount a defense. I woke at 6 that morning, before Cheryl. Made coffee. Stood at the kitchen window watching the sun come up over the mountains I'd loved for 20 years. The sky was that particular shade of purple that only happens in Montana autumn, the kind of color that usually made me feel grateful to be alive in this place. Today it just looked cold. She was still sleeping when I came back upstairs to check on her. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom for a long moment, watching her breathe. 24 years we'd shared this bed. Raised 2 kids under this roof. Built a life together, however imperfect. I tried to remember the last time I'd felt something like love for her. Actually felt it. Not just performed it out of habit. The best I could come up with was maybe 3 years ago, at Emma's college graduation. Cheryl had cried during the ceremony, and I'd put my arm around her, and for a moment it had felt like we were still partners, still connected. 3 years. Had she already been sleeping with Tyler by then? I checked the mental calendar. Yes. The affair had started 18 months ago, but that graduation was 2 years back. So there had been a time, after everything went wrong, when I'd still felt something for her. When she'd still felt like my wife instead of a stranger wearing my wife's face. I wondered when exactly that had changed for her. When I'd stopped being her husband and started being an obstacle, a mark, a convenient fool to keep in the dark while she played house with a cop half a county away. It didn't matter. None of it mattered anymore. She stirred and I turned away before she could see me watching. Went downstairs, poured more coffee, reviewed my timeline one more time. 9 a.m. Attorney files divorce papers. 9:30 a.m. Internal affairs meeting. 11 a.m. estimated. Cheryl receives papers at work. 1 p.m. Confrontation at home. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say, practiced it in front of the bathroom mirror like a man preparing for a job interview. The key was control. No shouting, no accusations, no emotional breakdown. Just facts delivered calmly, consequences laid out clearly. A prepper doesn't react. A prepper executes. I kissed her goodbye at 8:15, same as any other morning. She was eating toast, scrolling through her phone, barely looking up. "Have a good day," she said. "I will." I didn't feel satisfaction about any of it. No triumph, no vindication. Just the quiet certainty that I'd done what needed to be done, and now it was done. Harrison Webb filed the divorce papers electronically at 9:15 a.m. By the time Cheryl got to work, the documents were already in the system. At 9:30, I walked into the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office and asked to speak with Captain Louise Foster, head of internal affairs. The deputy at the front desk looked at me with the polite boredom of a man who'd heard 1,000 citizen complaints about parking tickets and noise violations. "What's this regarding, sir?" "Officer misconduct," I said. "I have documentation." Foster was a compact woman in her mid-50s with iron gray hair and the kind of eyes that had seen everything and been surprised by none of it. She met me in a conference room, accepted the folder I'd prepared, and began reviewing its contents without comment. 3 minutes of video. Tyler and Cheryl in the bunker, clearly identifiable, timestamps visible. Then the audio clip. Tyler's voice, casual and confident. I logged myself at the South County Patrol. No one ever checks. Foster's face hardened. She looked up at me, then back at the GPS spreadsheets, the duty log comparisons, the pattern of lies laid out in neat columns and color-coded cells. "How long have you known about this?" she asked. "Long enough to do it the right way. We'll need to verify this evidence, authenticate the recordings, confirm the GPS data." She paused. "But if it's legitimate, and it appears to be, Deputy Brewer's career is over." "That's what I'm counting on." Foster studied me for a long moment. "You could have gone to the media. A lot of people would have. Angry husband exposes cheating deputy. That's a story that writes itself. I'm a prepper, Captain. We prepare. We don't perform." Something like respect flickered in her eyes. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Whitfield. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry you had to bring this to us. No one should have to do what you just did." "No," I agreed. "They shouldn't." Cheryl received the divorce papers at 11:47 a.m., delivered to her dental office by a county process server. I know the exact time because she called me 14 seconds later. I let it ring. Let her leave a voicemail, frantic, confused, angry. "Carl, what is this? What's going on? Call me. Call me right now." I texted back 3 words. "Come home. Now." She made it in 32 minutes. Must have blown through every speed limit between Billings and our property. I was sitting at the kitchen table when she burst through the door, her face flushed, her dental scrub still spotted with whatever she'd been doing when the papers arrived. "Carl, please, just tell me what's—" She stopped when she saw what was on the table. My laptop, screen facing her chair, showing still frames from the bunker footage. Not the intimate moments, just Tyler and Cheryl at the entrance, clearly recognizable, timestamp glowing in the corner. October 20th, 2:34 p.m. All the color drained from her face. Carl, I can explain. No. I kept my voice level, conversational almost. You can't, and you won't. I'm not interested in your explanations. Please, just listen. The bunker was always mine, purchased with my father's inheritance, built before we were married. Separate property under Montana law. I ticked off the points on my fingers like I was reviewing a project checklist. The land is mine. The equipment is mine. The prenup you signed in 1999, do you remember that? It has a fidelity clause. You forfeit any claim to joint assets if either party commits adultery. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Carl, Tyler's badge will be gone by the end of the month, I continued. I gave Internal Affairs the GPS records this morning. 23 visits to this property while logging himself elsewhere. 19 documented instances of falsified duty records. Audio of him admitting to it. His career is over. His pension is gone. Cheryl sank into the chair across from me, like her legs had stopped working. Her hands were shaking. I watched her the way I'd watch a gauge on a piece of equipment, noting the readings without emotional investment. How long have you known? She whispered. Long enough. Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you confront me? Because I'm not stupid, Cheryl, and I'm not emotional. I'm prepared. I gestured at the laptop. 18 months. I found the emails, the jacket he left behind, the whiskey on my shelf. You shared my schedule with him. You brought him into my bunker, into the place I built to keep our family safe, and you used it as your... I stopped myself, breathed. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Your things will be packed. The tears came then, streaming down her face, mascara running. Carl, please. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to... For 18 months? Nothing just happens for 18 months. You planned it. You coordinated it. You mocked me in my own home while you were doing it. Tyler said you'd never find out. Her voice cracked. He said preppers were paranoid about the government, not their wives. He said Tyler was wrong about a lot of things. She sat there crying, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no victory, no release. Just the quiet certainty that I'd done what needed to be done, exactly the way it needed to be done. Then something changed in her face. The tears kept flowing, but underneath them, something harder emerged. Something I'd never seen in 24 years of marriage. You think you've won? Her voice was different now, edged with something like venom. Tyler has friends, lots of friends in the department. They're not just going to let this go. Is that a threat? It's a fact, Carl. You're a prepper. They already think you're some kind of crazy hermit stockpiling guns in the woods. How hard do you think it'll be for them to make your life difficult? Wellness checks at 3 in the morning? Your name on a list somewhere? These things happen to people who make enemies of cops. I reached across the table and turned my phone face up. The recording app was running, the counter ticking off seconds. I documented everything, I said quietly, including this conversation. Her face went white. You have 30 days, I repeated. I suggest you use them wisely. She left that night. Packed a bag with shaking hands, called her sister for a place to stay, and drove away without looking back. I stood on the porch and watched her taillights disappear down the long driveway. Then I went inside, poured myself a glass of water, and began changing the locks. The fallout came exactly as I'd predicted. Tyler Brewer was placed on administrative leave November 5th. His service weapon was confiscated. His access to department systems was revoked. Internal Affairs moved fast once they had verified evidence. Foster ran a tight ship, and she didn't tolerate officers who made her department look bad. He showed up at my property November 12th, driving his personal truck now since the county vehicle was off limits. I met him at the gate, didn't invite him past it. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in a week. Unshaven. Dark circles under his eyes. The confident swagger I remembered from our preparedness workshops was gone, replaced by something desperate and unstable. Carl. He stopped about 6 feet away, hands raised slightly like he was approaching a wild animal. Carl, please, just hear me out. You're on my property. I know, and I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come, but I don't know what else to do. His voice cracked. You don't understand what you've done. I have kids. I have a family. My whole life. You should have thought about that. And about mine. I know. He ran a hand through his unwashed hair. I know I screwed up. What Cheryl and I did, it was wrong. I'm not going to stand here and pretend it wasn't. But Carl, please, there has to be some way to fix this. Some way to fix this? I kept my voice flat, unemotional. You slept with my wife in my bunker for 18 months. You falsified duty logs to cover it up. You used a county vehicle to do it. You told Cheryl you could use your badge to intimidate me if I ever found out. And now you want to fix it? He flinched at each point, like I was hitting him. I was going to end it, he said quietly. I swear to God, Carl, I was going to end it. Things got out of hand. Cheryl, she... Don't blame her. You're both responsible. I'm not blaming her. I'm just saying, it was complicated. We got in too deep, and I didn't know how to get out without hurting everyone. I kept thinking if I could just make Sergeant get stable, I could figure out a way to... A way to what? Keep sleeping with my wife while wearing the badge that's supposed to protect this community? Tyler's jaw tightened. For a moment, something of the old arrogance flickered across his face. You preppers are all the same, you know that? Sitting out here on your compounds, stockpiling supplies for disasters that never come, judging everyone else for living normal lives. You think you're so much better than the rest of us because you're prepared for the apocalypse. And yet, I'm the one who's still standing, I said, while you're about to lose everything. How's that preparation looking now? The arrogance crumbled. His shoulders sagged. Carl, please. I can make things right. I'll transfer. I'll leave the county entirely. Hell, I'll leave Montana if that's what it takes. Just tell Internal Affairs you made a mistake with the evidence. Tell them you misread the GPS data, that you jumped to conclusions. I don't make mistakes. That's kind of my thing. There has to be something. There isn't. I looked at him. This man I'd trusted. This man who'd sat in my workshops and pretended to respect what I was building while he was planning how to use it for his own entertainment. You thought I was a joke, a paranoid fool preparing for disasters that would never come. Turns out the disaster came, and I was ready for it. Were you? He didn't have an answer for that. He stood there for a long moment, his face cycling through emotions I didn't care to identify. Anger, desperation, fear, resignation. You're going to destroy my family, he said finally. My kids, they're going to grow up knowing their father got fired in disgrace. Rachel already knows. She filed for divorce 3 days ago. That hit him like a physical blow. He actually stepped back, his face going gray. How do you know that? She came to see me, to thank me for finally giving her proof of what she'd suspected for years. Tyler stared at me, and I watched something break behind his eyes. Not his arrogance, not his confidence, something deeper. The last illusion that any of this was going to work out in his favor. I'm not going to beg, he said, his voice hollow. I can see that's not going to work. No, it's not. But I want you to know something, Carl. Whatever happens next, I never meant to hurt you. Cheryl and I, we wanted something. Something you weren't giving her. That's not an excuse, I know it's not, but it's true. Get off my property, I said, and don't come back. He got back in his truck and drove away. He parked on the road for 20 minutes afterward. I documented that too. November 15th. A visitor I didn't expect. Rachel Brewer was 36 years old, a nurse at Billings General, mother of 2 children whose father was about to lose everything. I'd expected anger when she knocked on my door. Recrimination. Maybe even threats, like her husband's. Instead, she looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and said, "Thank you." I stood in the doorway, processing. "I'm sorry? Can I come in? I won't take much of your time." I stepped aside, led her to the kitchen, made coffee because that's what you do in Montana when someone shows up at your door. She sat at the same table where I'd confronted Cheryl a week earlier, her hands folded in front of her, calm in a way that seemed earned rather than natural. "I know about everything," she said when I set the mug in front of her. "The bunker, the emails, the GPS records. Internal Affairs called me as part of their investigation. Next of kin notification, I guess." "I see." I suspected for years. She wrapped her hands around the mug like she needed its warmth. Little things that didn't add up. Late shifts that were never on the schedule when I checked. The way he'd come home smelling different. Different cologne, I don't know, a different energy. But I never had proof. I could never be sure enough to confront him. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "I didn't do this to hurt you or your children." "I know. You did it to protect yourself." That's what I should have done years ago, instead of pretending everything was fine. She took a shaky breath. "I filed for divorce the day after he was suspended. Full custody of the kids. The house. Everything he's going to have left after your evidence destroys his career." "How are the kids handling it?" "They're confused, scared. They don't understand why Daddy had to move out, why Mommy's been crying so much." Her voice wavered but didn't break. "But they're resilient. Kids usually are. And in the long run, this is better than the alternative. Growing up in a house built on lies, watching their parents pretend to love each other while one of them was running around behind the other's back." I thought about Emma and Daniel. The phone calls I'd have to make. The explanations I'd have to give. At least they were adults. At least they'd understand, eventually, why this had to happen the way it did. "Tyler came to see me," I said, "a few days ago. Wanted me to tell Internal Affairs I'd made a mistake." Rachel laughed, a bitter sound. "Of course he did. That's Tyler. Always thinking he can talk his way out of anything. Charm his way past the consequences." She shook her head. "You know what the worst part is? I think he actually believes he's a good person. That what he did was somehow understandable. Forgivable. Like the rules that apply to everyone else shouldn't apply to him because he's a cop, because he's handsome, because people have always let him get away with things. Not this time. No, not this time." She met my eyes directly, and I saw something there. Not gratitude exactly, but recognition. The shared understanding of 2 people who'd been lied to by the same man, in different ways, for different reasons. "He told me once, right after I confronted him, that you'd never see it coming," she said. "That you were too busy worrying about the apocalypse to notice what was happening in your own home." He thought it was hilarious. The big prepper with his bunker full of supplies, preparing for every disaster except the one sleeping next to him. Guess he was wrong about that. Guess he was. She stood, leaving the coffee mostly untouched. "I just wanted you to know. You didn't ruin my life. He did that himself. And whatever happens next, at least I'm not living a lie anymore." "For what it's worth," I said, walking her to the door, "you seem like you're going to be okay." "I have to be," she said simply. "I've got 2 kids depending on me. I don't have the luxury of falling apart." She left, and I stood at the window watching her drive away, thinking about how many lives had intersected with mine and Cheryl's over the past 18 months. The children who didn't ask for any of this. The spouse who'd been betrayed just like me. The community that would whisper and speculate for months. None of it was my fault. All of it was connected to my choices. I went back to work on the bunker's ventilation system. Some things you can control, and some things you can't. Focus on the former. November 20th. Internal Affairs delivered its verdict. Deputy Tyler Brewer was found to have committed multiple violations including falsification of official records, misuse of county vehicle, and conduct unbecoming an officer. He was terminated with cause. His pension was forfeited. An appeal was filed and denied within 72 hours. The evidence was simply too overwhelming. The local paper ran a small story. Deputy terminated following misconduct investigation. No names of complainants. No lurid details. Just the bare facts of a career imploding in public view. Cheryl's divorce was finalized December 18th. She contested initially, through a lawyer who'd taken one look at my documentation and advised her to settle. The prenup was airtight. The evidence of adultery was undeniable. In the end, she received her personal belongings, her individual retirement accounts, and nothing else. The house, the land, the bunker, the $34,000 in joint savings. All of it stayed with me. She didn't say a word to me during the final hearing. Didn't look at me. Just signed the papers and walked out, smaller than I remembered her being. I watched her go and felt the same vast nothing I'd felt since the night I found the whiskey bottle in my bunker. I wrote it up for the prepper form in late November. No names, no identifying details, just the tactical lessons. Security lessons. Learned. When the threat comes from inside. Lesson 1. Trust, but verify, even family. Lesson 2. Your security systems protect you from threats you haven't imagined yet. Lesson 3. Documentation is survival. Lesson 4. The system works if you use it correctly. Lesson 5. Preparation isn't just about supplies, it's about mindset. The post went viral in prepper circles. I received dozens of messages over the following weeks. Men who'd found similar problems and never checked. Women who'd suspected partners of betrayal but lacked the evidence. People who'd been burned by trusting the wrong person and wanted to know how to prevent it from happening again. I answered all of them. We're a community, after all. We help each other prepare. Spring came to Montana the way it always does. Slowly, grudgingly, the snow retreating up the mountainsides like a tide going out. I stood on my porch in early May, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over 80 acres that were mine and mine alone. The bunker code had been changed the day after Cheryl left. 12 new digits that meant nothing to anyone but me. The cameras were still there, updated now with better resolution and longer storage. The motion sensors on the perimeter had been upgraded. The secondary exit had a new lock, keyed only to my thumbprint. I'd spent 20 years preparing for disasters, economic collapse, natural catastrophe, social breakdown. I'd built a sanctuary beneath the earth and filled it with everything a family might need to survive when the world stopped making sense. I never prepared for betrayal. Never imagined the threat would come from inside my own home, wearing the face of a woman I'd loved and trusted for nearly a quarter century. But that's the thing about preparation. It's not a checklist, it's a mindset. When the disaster came, I assessed. I planned. I executed. I survived. Emma still called every Sunday. She'd cut off contact with her mother entirely after seeing the evidence, not because I'd asked her to, but because she couldn't forgive what Cheryl had done. Daniel was still working on it, he said, trying to maintain relationships with both parents. I didn't push him either way. Kids shouldn't have to choose. Rachel Brewer started attending my preparedness courses in February. I never want to be unprepared again, she'd said, and I understood exactly what she meant. We'd become friends, not romantic, just two people who'd survived the same disaster and found solid ground on the other side. Tyler was working security at a warehouse in Billings now. $18 an hour, no benefits, no future. He'd applied to law enforcement agencies in 3 other counties. His record followed him everywhere. Cheryl lived alone in a small apartment in Billings, still working as a dental hygienist, still existing day after day in the ruins of a life she'd demolished with her own hands. I didn't feel satisfaction about any of it. No triumph, no vindication, just the quiet certainty that I'd done what needed to be done, and now it was done. The last thing I found was an email she'd never sent. I was doing a final security sweep of Cheryl's old account before closing it permanently, tying up loose ends, eliminating potential vulnerabilities. In the drafts folder, I found a message dated 2 weeks before I discovered the whiskey bottle in my bunker. Tyler, I think we need to end this. I can't keep lying to Carl. He deserves better, and I'm tired of hiding who I really am. Can we talk? She'd thought about telling me. 2 weeks before everything fell apart, she'd composed an email admitting the truth. There was no response in the drafts. Tyler must have called her instead of writing back. But I knew what he'd said. I'd seen his other messages, his constant reassurances that they'd never be caught, his promises that they'd figure out the next step after his promotion came through. He'd talked her out of confessing, for his own benefit, not hers. Used her guilt and her fear to keep the affair going, to keep using my bunker and mocking my preparations and sleeping with my wife in the place I'd built to keep my family safe. She'd almost done the right thing. Almost. I deleted the draft, closed the account permanently, walked outside into the Montana morning. The mountains were purple against the eastern sky. The air was cold and clean and smelled like pine. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk circled over the tree line, hunting for breakfast. I'd built a good life here, a prepared life. Whatever came next, economic collapse or natural disaster or just the slow passage of years into old age, I was ready for it. The bunker was secure. The property was protected. The code was new, and only one person in the world knew it now.